folks, to another episode of the Infinite Podcast. I'm your host, diving into today's digital hieroglyphs, emojis. Let's talk history. Language is always morphing, right? And now we've got emojis popping up as a kind of global lingo. Are these tiny pics bridging communication gaps or what? It's wild how we're adapting so fast, using smiley faces instead of words. Simon, what's your take?
Emojis, global language? I'm skeptical, Joe. All right, they're universal in the sense that a smiley face is a smiley face anywhere you go. But come on, my grandma sends me a thumbs up emoji. Does it mean good job or stop texting me? There's still a lot getting lost in emoji translation, if you ask me.
Totally, Simon. Emojis skirt around language barriers, but they're no Rosetta Stone. Interpretation's key. That thumbs up from your grandma, it's got a context cloak. It could be applause or polite dismissal, right? We adapt, sure, but emojis won't replace the nuances of spoken tongue anytime soon. Their rise, though, shows we're game for simplicity and speed in our chats.
Speed and simplicity, for sure. I tried writing a book entirely in emojis once, Joe. It was a real page-turner until you hit the eggplant chapter. Things got weird.
You just reminded me, Simon. Had this techie buddy who texted his whole vacation using just emojis. We're talking palm trees for beaches and bicycles for tours, a visual diary, basically. It was cracking everyone up, trying to piece it together like some modern treasure map. But here's the kicker. When he lost his phone, no words, nothing written down, that emoji story was all we had. Shows you right there how much weight these symbols carry in today's tales.
So, emojis are the new cave paintings? That's nuts.
Cave paintings, huh? You could say we're looping back to old habits. But cave art had clear intent. Bison meant food, right? Now it's murkier. Emojis layer on modern complexity. They can be playful or serious, which is ironic considering they're just cartoons. It's a step forward and a throwback all in one. Makes you wonder if our ancestors would have used the flamenco dancer for a successful hunt.
They'd have loved the facepalm emoji, Joe. Talk about a hunt fail.
Oh, without a doubt. Imagine cave walls filled with face palms. But here's where I'll toss in a curveball. Isn't it lazy communication? Instead of describing the frustration or failure, slap on a facepalm emoji and call it a day. Where's the art in that? Emojis trim down our stories, sure, but they can also dull the edges of a good tale. Isn't there a risk we're trading depth for convenience?
Yeah, we risk our storytelling prowess turning into a jumble of cartoon faces and symbols. Every time I see that facepalm emoji, there's zero buildup, no juicy backstory, just boop, the climax without the ride. Makes me kind of miss the whole gathering around the fire to hear an epic saga vibe.
Right? Here's a tale for you. Back in my college days, I texted this girl I liked with a careful blend of words and emojis. One misstep. I sent a rocket ship instead of a car emoji, talking about our upcoming road trip. She replied with an alien head. Confusion galore. We met up later, laughing about the space-themed adventure we were apparently planning. Lesson learned, a rocket's no Subaru, and nothing beats human conversation to clear the cosmic fog. It shows, even with today's elaborate emoji keyboard, some things still get lost unless you spell it out.
You've got me thinking about the time my buddy texted me an emoji combo. Pizza slice, question mark, and then a clock. I figured he was asking what time we should order pizza. So there I am, outside his place at 7 p.m., starving, only to find out he'd wanted to know if it's too late to put leftover pizza in the fridge. We both just stood there, stomachs rumbling, trying not to laugh, all because of emoji miscommunication.
I mean, there it is, the emoji chaos in action. Suppose your buddy had just called or texted with actual words, no growling stomachs at his doorstep. While we joke about it, this trend hints at bigger communication breakdowns, doesn't it? Relying on emojis can scramble a simple message. They add flavor, sure, but they're not your main course for clarity. Sometimes these little guys are more trouble than they're worth, and that leads us to wonder, are we sliding backwards into confusion while dressing it up as evolving language?
Evolution or mess. That's the emoji paradox right there, Joe.
Nailed it, Simon. Emojis, modern hieroglyphs, or digital mayhem.
Yep, they're like modern hieroglyphs that can sometimes leave us in a digital muddle. We get the illusion of connecting across cultures quickly, but nuances often end up as roadkill on this high-speed communication highway. Emojis pack a punch, but when it comes to real meaning, they can hit and miss.
So, Simon, what's your take on where we go from here with emojis? Should we embrace them more in our daily communication or start reining it in before we spiral into a full-on emoji babel?
Do you think we should be teaching emoji decoding as a skill, or just stick to leaning on good old words?
All right, circling back to our furry friends, disobeying the laws of physics, cats always seem to land on their feet and squish into spaces they clearly shouldn't fit. It's like they've got their own set of rules, ignoring gravity and volume like pros. I mean, teaching emoji decoding? Maybe one day. But if we ever crack feline physics, that's when we're onto something. Remember, folks, whether it's emojis or cats, some mysteries keep life interesting. Speaking of which, let's pivot a bit. Simon, ever heard about those studies claiming houseplants can boost your mood? What's your verdict on turning your place into a mini jungle?
Talk about mood boosters. Cats might have their mysterious physical prowess cornered, but there's something about the quiet presence of houseplants that gives off some serious chill vibes. They're kind of like nature's live emojis right inside your home, each one subtly affecting your environment and mood. Speaking of cats, let's pounce over to what I call Feline Physics 101. Ever watch a cat fall? Not only do they have this insane righting reflex that lets them twist midair to land on their feet, but people also joke that they have 9 lives because of it. Let's dig into the physics of how cats always stick the landing.
Cats, man, they're like little ninjas of nature. They've got this righting reflex that's just wild science. They can rotate their bodies in midair to nail those gravity-defying landings. And that 9 lives myth? It's got to be inspired by their incredible survival skills. They make it look effortless, but trust me, there's some complex biomechanics at work under that fur. Incredible creatures, really.
Totally ninja. The agility cats have is just plain cool.
Absolutely. Cats' agility. It's all about the science of their spine. Unlike us humans, cats have this extra flexible vertebral column that helps them twist without injury and align their legs for a precision landing every time. The righting reflex starts young. Kittens as early as 3 weeks old begin to master it. And while we're at it, there's no actual magic behind their 9 lives, but it's a testament to their durability and maybe a bit of our envy. Let's face it, who wouldn't want a few extra shots at risky leaps?
Envy's right. Wish I had that kind of bounce back.
Don't we all, Simon? Resilience goals right there.
Cats setting the bar high for agility and resilience, indeed.
Absolutely. But Simon, let's not put cats on too high a pedestal. In the realm of physics, they're not defying any laws. They're just using them like pros. That's right, no magic here, just pure, perfect physics. And while we admire their acrobatics, let's be real. It's great as long as they're not knocking stuff off our shelves for fun. So the next time your cat does a crazy midair somersault and lands on its feet, appreciate the physics show, but maybe keep the breakables out of reach. Now, shifting gears from feline finesse to human marvels, have you ever looked into those folks who do parkour? They're like the human version of agile cats.
Parkour, huh? Isn't that like urban gymnastics, where people leap between buildings and do all those insane flips? How similar is that to feline acrobatics in the grand scheme of things?
Oh, for sure. Parkour is like the human homage to cat agility. People bounding over urban jungles, flipping and leaping. They're just missing the tail for balance. If cats ever start wearing GoPros and filming their stunts, we'd probably have the next viral YouTube sensation. Kitty parkour, the feline art of jumping on stuff you just bought. But really, when it comes to physics and athleticism, both cats and parkour artists show us what's possible with a bit of flexibility and a whole lot of practice.
Kitty parkour. Now that's a video series I'd binge.
Binge-worthy, sure, but think about it. We'd be sitting there watching cats outmaneuver us in our own homes. It's one thing to be amazed by their agility, but imagine trying to feline-proof your house for a kitty parkour course. And really, is teaching our whiskered pals to navigate obstacle courses what we need? I feel like that's giving them even more power. They already own the internet with memes. Next, they'll be dominating ESPN with their flips and tricks. Let's keep some human-only sports while we're at it, right? Anyway, let's climb back from kiddie parkour to another topic. How about those dreams where you're falling? Ever wonder if they mean something bigger?
Dreams, falling, hidden fears, or just too much cheese for dinner.
So, about those falling dreams, had one that was a real mind-bender. I'm on this skyscraper's roof looking down at the street below, teetering on the edge. You'd think it's all about fear of heights, right? Well, wake up in a cold sweat, and what happens next? My cat leaps onto the bed, totally unfazed by his jump from the dresser. It hits me. Sometimes we're just out of our element. A precarious ledge for me is a catwalk for felines. It's nature's design. Cats got that reflex to roll with the falls they take. Meanwhile, we're wired to avoid them. Maybe we respect cats' 9 lives because they've mastered something we've barely started to understand in ourselves: the art of always landing on our feet.
So when it comes to aquarium acoustics, think about it. Fish don't have Beats by Dre. They're swimming in a world where sound travels way faster than in air, and those tank walls can really amp up the noise. We've got to consider their eardrums, or I guess lack thereof. Let's not crank up our death metal too loud next to our gilled pals. Just imagine if your goldfish started headbanging, that'd be a sight. But seriously, healthier for them means less stress and maybe even longer fishy lives. Keep the tunes down. Save the rock concerts for the landlubbers, folks. Now, leaping out of the water and onto dry land, what are your thoughts on inventors who were thought to be crazy but ended up changing the world?
Ha! Can you imagine fish concerts with underwater mosh pits? Jokes aside, it makes sense to consider our finned friends' hearing. Without eardrums like ours, fish sense vibrations directly in the water around them, so cranking up the volume could definitely mess with their zen. We have to remember that our aquatic buddies rely on a calm environment for good health. With research focusing more on how fish communicate and respond to sound, this awareness is leading to better pet care and even advancements in understanding aquatic life communication. Pretty crucial stuff for keeping Nemo happy at home. Speaking of breakthroughs, it's interesting how some inventors initially looked crazy but ended up revolutionizing our world. That kind of bold innovation reminds me of the strides we're making in understanding marine biology. Just fascinating, don't you think?
Yeah, but let's flip the tank here. Think about it. Some might argue we're pampering these fish too much. Are we babying them, keeping everything super quiet? Out in the wild, the ocean's not exactly a silent retreat. They deal with all sorts of natural sounds: waves, storms, other creatures. Maybe being too cautious could make domesticated fish less fishy? If they ever got back into the sea, would they be like, "Whoa, what is this place?" Research is key, sure, but maybe there's a balance to strike between silence and naturally noisy.
You've got a point, Simon. Domesticating any animal comes with the risk of making them too soft for their natural environment. Fish are no exception. They're evolutionarily tuned to the symphony of the sea, not the sound of silence we might be curating in our living rooms. But there's a flip side. Think about it. Wild oceans aren't blaring sounds of Netflix binges or constant hums of home appliances. It's a different playlist out there. We need that Goldilocks zone where the tank's vibes are just right. Not too loud, not library silent. Let's also remember research helps us understand these creatures better so we can mimic a more authentic habitat for them, which is especially crucial given how we've impacted their ocean homes. It strikes me that this balance could apply to plenty of other scenarios, like technology usage. How do you think we find the middle ground with our own screen time before our brains short circuit?
Balance is key. Set limits, take breaks, and enjoy real life.
Sure, balance. Reminds me of this time I set up a new aquarium, a real beaut with neon tetras. Got so obsessed with those little guys that I spent hours just watching them zigzag through the water. One day, my setup's filter got loud, like really loud. Thought nothing of it until one of the fish started acting off and the others weren't as vibrant. Took a moment to understand it wasn't just sights capturing my attention. There was noise pollution going on for my aquatic amigos. A bit like when we stay glued to our phones, it's not natural. Tuned down the filter, gave my attention to offline stuff more, And wouldn't you know it, the whole tank perked right back up. So did I.
Tech detox for the soul, quieter filters for happy fish.
Man, we're all just trying to find that sweet spot, right? It's like when you get those float tank sessions, pure, unadulterated quiet. That's real peace. Same deal with our aquatic buddies. Their world is water, and the less noise pollution in it, the better they vibe. Both us and fish, we need those moments of stillness for sanity's sake. So yeah, dim the screens and soften the filters. Keep it simple, keep it clean, whether it's your mind or your aquarium.
Stillness matters for us and the fish. Balance is bliss.
Balance is bliss, true for life, true for our finned friends.
Absolutely. Harmony in the tank. Harmony in life.
Harmony, yes, but let's not forget, a little controlled chaos can be good too. Just like we sometimes need a challenging workout to feel alive, maybe fish also benefit from a bit of variety in their soundscape. Obviously not blasting heavy metal, but light, periodic changes in their environment could stimulate them, keep them agile, prevent the aquatic equivalent of couch potato syndrome. So while stillness matters, let's not go overboard and turn our tanks into sensory deprivation chambers for fish. What's life without a little spike in the rhythm now and then, right?
Hey, new listeners. Welcome to the Splash Zone. We've been diving into aquarium acoustics. That's right, how noise affects our guild friends in fish tanks. We're all about finding that sweet spot between a library and a rock concert for their underwater digs. It's important to keep their tank environment chill without making it overly quiet. We want our fish feeling at home without turning them into couch potatoes. Think Zen garden meets occasional waves crashing. That's the vibe we're aiming for. Keep those fins flapping.
Hey now, let's not get too cozy with that Zen garden analogy. While the occasional sound wave might be a welcome stir, what if we piped in some actual waves or mild ocean sounds? Imagine fish getting the ambiance of their ancestors' open sea without the predator stress. Could jazz up their day-to-day and keep those fins sharp. But then again, there's probably that one grumpy old catfish who'd rather just snooze in his castle. Can't please them all. Always pushing boundaries. That's how you make waves in aquatics, literally and figuratively. Keep swimming, folks, but remember to sometimes go against the current. It's good for the gills.
Man, think about this. We're out here trying to set the mood for our fish like we're some kind of undersea DJ. What's up, tank crowd? This next wave sound goes out to Coral Carl in the back, bobbing near the fake treasure chest. Get those fins wiggling. Meanwhile, there's probably a snail stuck to the side thinking, can y'all turn down the ocean? I'm trying to nap over here.
Ocean DJ spinning tracks for fish? Hilarious. But hey, let's not cater our playlists just to the scale-covered partygoers like Coral Carl. We might also need some lo-fi beats or classical melodies for the more introspective tetratypes. Think beta fish meet Beethoven. Keeps the mind sharp and those fins sophisticated. Mixing it up could be the key. Too much calm? Fish might get bored. Full-on rave every day? Well, that's a recipe for aquatic anxiety. So let's curate that playlist with care. Maybe even toss in some audio enrichment. Who knows? We could be sparking some fishy genius in there with the right tunes. Okay, listeners, now while we ponder whether fish have favorite genres, what's your perfect soundtrack for a chill yet stimulating vibe, underwater or otherwise? Keep those thoughts bubbling.
So Joe, you think these underwater soundtracks could actually be like brain food for our fishy friends?
Absolutely. Every creature needs a little enrichment, fish included. The right sounds could stimulate their brains and keep things interesting in the tank. But switching gears to our parrot comedy hour, never a dull moment with those feathered jesters around. Their ability to mimic us throws up a mirror on human silliness. Plus, who can keep a straight face watching them bob to the beat of their own beaks? Parrots really remind us not to take life too seriously. Now, audience, have you ever seen your pets do something so unexpectedly human that it cracks you up? Share those stories. Let's keep the laughs rolling.
Speaking of soundtracks and our aquatic DJ stint, it really circles back to how all animals, even us, are influenced by the sounds around us. Parrots? They're maestros at mimicking. It's like they've taken monkey see, monkey do to a whole new level. Ever heard a parrot meow after spending time with a cat? Hilarious confusion ensues. And now, diving headfirst from fish tanks to feathery fun, let's talk Parrot Comedy Hour. These birds might not need playlists because they create their own. Have you ever seen those clips where parrots are dropping beats or sounding like car alarms? So hit us up with your best parrot stories. We want to hear about every squawk and mischievous mimic that left you in stitches.
Oh man, parrots are stand-up comedians of the bird world. This one time, I watched a clip of a parrot that perfectly mimicked the sound of water dripping. Guy had his owner checking pipes for leaks, and another had learned the ringtone of its owner's phone. People were reaching for their pockets every few seconds. The big debate is, do parrots actually get the humor in their mimicry, or are we the ones amused by their sheer randomness? They blur lines between animal instinct and human-like behavior, creating this unique bond and tons of laugh-out-loud moments. Let's hear those stories, folks. Ever had a parrot throw your own words back at you like a feathery echo? Share away, and let's get chuckling.
Parrots, the jesters of skies, do they get their own jokes?
So, Simon, do you really think parrots understand the humor when they mimic us? Or are they just vocal copycats without a clue about their comedic timing?
Just savvy copycats, Joe. Their timing is just us projecting.
That's a fair point. But Simon, do you think their ability to mimic so precisely hints at some deeper level of intelligence, even if they don't get the joke?
Deeper intelligence, maybe. But understanding humor? That's a human thing, Joe. They're like organic recorders. Impressive for sure, but let's not give them too much credit.
So you reckon it's all instinct then? They just hit record and play without getting the context of what they're saying?
Definitely, it's instinct and learning. No clue about the punchline. But we love them for it. Their blunders are pure gold.
Right, instinct it is. Parrots are incredible mimics without grasping the joke's heart. But hey, who needs understanding when you've got perfect comedic execution? It's like a comedian nailing a punchline in a foreign language. They may not get the humor, but we're rolling on the floor. So to all you out there tuning in right now, ever witnessed your bird throw out something so bizarre, so off the cuff that it caught you completely off guard? Share those cheeky parrot tales with us during our Parrot Comedy Hour, and let's see whose feathered friend is the inadvertent king or queen of comedy. Keep 'em coming.
So, Joe, any personal stories of a parrot throwing you for a loop with spot-on mimicry?
Oh, you bet. Once visited an aviary where a gray parrot threw my own laugh right back at me. I chuckled at its antics, and next thing I know, it's copying me. Pitch perfect. Took me a minute to realize that the laughter wasn't echoing. It was this bird having a go at me. It did make me wonder who was really in charge of the comedy routine, me or the parrot with my laugh on repeat. And for all our listeners out there, we're still tuned into the Parrot Comedy Hour. Ever had your own sound echoed back by a feathery friend? Drop us those stories. Let's enjoy the uncanny valley of parrot mimicry together.
Charge of the comedy routine? My money's on the parrot, Joe. And that laugh, maybe it's got a future in stand-up. But come on, folks. Has a parrot ever made you question reality with its impressions? Share those bizarre, mimic moments. We gotta hear 'em. Don't leave me hanging. I need my daily dose of absurdity.
Parrots fooling us is peak comedy. Share those quirky stories.
So, Joe, it's wild to think about these birds throwing laughs back at us. Ever had a moment where you actually found the parrot's mimicry better than the original sound?
Yeah, their ringtone renditions are sometimes crisper than the phone's.
Well, Joe, sounds like I need a parrot ringtone.
So, if you had a parrot learning your ringtone, Simon, would you let it keep the spotlight or would you change the tune?
Keep it, Joe. Imagine the confusion, walking around, constantly thinking your phone's ringing. Comedy gold, my parrot would be a riot at parties.
Sure, it's funny at first, but seriously, fancy getting punked by a bird nonstop? It's one thing to have a chuckle, another to be on edge because you can't tell if it's your boss or your pet. We need boundaries, my friend. And speaking of parrot pranks, folks, we want to hear your best ones. Ever had a bird outsmart you or a house guest? Tell us how your feathered trickster brought the laughs, but don't make us wait. Drop those stories right now.
So, a parrot walks into a bar. Yep, Joe, that could actually happen with these prankster birds. Bartender says, "Why the long beak?" Parrot goes, "Because my owner's late on the seed bill." Keep those tales coming, folks.
Well, I'll one-up that parrot joke for you, Simon. A parrot walks into a bar. Bartender asks, "What'll it be?" The parrot says, "Just put it on my bill." Classic twist. But truly, if these birds could waddle into bars and crack jokes, they'd steal the show every time. So what about you all listening in? Ever had a parrot create the perfect punchline or startle someone at just the right moment with its antics? We're still rolling with the Parrot Comedy Hour here on Infinite Podcast, so hit us with your best bird blunders and finest feathery follies. Keep those stories coming. Let's ruffle some feathers with laughter together.
When's the last time a parrot actually got you, Joe? Any fresh pranks from our beaked buddies?
No recent pranks on me, but I'm always on guard with those mischievous mimics around.
You ever wonder if those parrots know they're pulling one over on us, or is it all just happy accidents?
Honestly, are they scheming tricksters or just accidental comedians? The world may never know. But let's shift gears a bit. Did you hear about the latest ethical debates around engineered pets? Biotinkering made it possible to customize creatures, but at what cost to their well-being and ours? It's an ethical minefield. Our connection with nature hinges on respect, not just tech prowess. And that wraps up our dive into the ethical enigmas of engineered companions, folks. Chatting about parrots actually led us into some deep waters. Where do you stand? Shoot us your thoughts and join us next time for another round of curveballs on Infinite Podcast. Stay curious, friends.
Biotinkering our way out of who's smarter, us or the parrots. Let's not forget, with great power comes great responsibility. Speaking of which, engineering pets, huh? It's like going from teachable moments with Polly to playing pet god. Not just changing colors, we're talking custom cuddle buddies with all sorts of tweaks. But at what cost? Are they still pets or living gadgets now? Where's that line between innovation and interference, Joe?
It's a slippery slope, Simon. Once we start picking and choosing genes, where do we stop? The natural charm of pets is their unpredictability, their authentic selves. If we engineer them for convenience, are they pets or just another tech accessory? Plus, think about the health issues these designer animals could face. Allergies in hypoallergenic cats, for instance. We're opening up Pandora's box for what, a customizable tail wag. And hey, to our listeners, this isn't just about playing with genetics willy-nilly. There are real concerns here. What would you consider too far when it comes to modifying your pets? Drop into the conversation. Let's dissect this like a frog in biology class. Respectfully, of course. Keep tuned in as we unravel the ethical enigmas of engineered companions right here on Infinite Podcast.
Yeah, Joe. Yo, where do you draw the line? Would a pet with a pre-programmed personality even bring the same joy as our unpredictable, slobbering pals today?
That reminds me of my aunt's old dog, Rusty. That dog was a mix of everything. Nobody knew his breed. He had the quirkiest habits. He could spend hours staring at a fish tank, barely blinking. One day, we decided to move the fish tank just to see what he'd do. For an entire week, Rusty would go where the tank used to be and just look confused. Then finally, he adapted to the new spot without fuss. This scrappy, eccentric mongrel brought something unique to their lives that you couldn't program or predict. No engineered personality could mimic the charm of those genuine moments where Rusty's spontaneous nature just shined through. So circling back without being too on the nose here, isn't there value in these natural, unscripted behaviors? When we talk about bioengineering for convenience in pets, aren't we risking missing out on these authentic, sometimes comically profound bonds?
Could any engineered quirk ever match Rusty's genuine, hilarious fish tank fascination?
Well, Simon, here's a thought. Maybe bioengineering isn't all about quirks, but also solving real problems. For those severely allergic to pets, a genetically altered animal could be the only way they experience companionship. If we can strip away the health risks while keeping the essence of the animal intact, some might argue it's worth it. And if someone loves their engineered pet just as much, who are we to judge? It's about enhancing lives while balancing ethical boundaries. Next up on Infinite Podcast Sports Edition. Despite me never hitting a home run in Little League, let's talk Major League dreams, fantasy teams, and fierce rivalries. Do stats ruin the love of the game or sharpen the thrill? Share your hot takes now, folks.
Sure, hypoallergenic creatures are sweet news for allergy sufferers. But remember, nature's messy for a reason. Are we trading genuine pet chaos for sanitized companionship? What happens to the good old rescued mutt's chance of finding a loving home if everyone's chasing that perfect engineered buddy?
Diving a bit deeper, Simon, the messy charm of nature versus the clean slate of engineered pets is really about diversity. Historically, pet selection was driven by practical needs and natural bonds. Now, with genetic modification on the table, we risk narrowing that genetic pool. Consider this. Each year, millions of mutts, animals with diverse gene pools often leading to robust health, get passed over in shelters. While bioengineering could reduce allergies or illnesses, it also potentially undermines the adoption of these uniquely blended creatures, each with their own story and personality quirks not governed by our desires, but by the wild mix of genetics they happen to inherit. Not to get too grim here, folks, but remember that every time we pick a feature at a genetic menu, there's a shelter animal losing out on a chance for love and a home. Let's not forget those underdogs and undercats in our rush towards tomorrow's pet market. Keep chewing on that, listeners. We'll be back after the break to wrestle with even more ethical conundrums right here on Infinite Podcast.
Narrowing that genetic pool, indeed. These animals aren't car models. We can't just pick and choose the shiny parts. Shelter pets come with their own lovable surprises, not a features list. What's next? Swiping right on puppies based on gene profiles? It's like we're trying to control Z nature's work. Folks, tune in, chime in, call it meddling or miracle science. Engineered pets are a hot debate, and you bet your kibble we're not done unpacking this can of worms. Stay with us.
Haha! Swiping right on puppies? I can see the dating profiles now. Barkley, 3 years old, loves long walks, genetically predisposed to playing fetch and not chewing your shoes. It's like Tinder for terriers. But seriously, folks, while it's fun to jest, we're talking about living beings, not just a product upgrade. Share your thoughts. Do we need a DNA wish list for pets, or should we swipe left on this whole idea? Keep those comments coming. We've got our lab coats on and ethics caps tight for this discussion on Infinite Podcast.
All right, wrapping up on the enigma that's currently turning our moral compasses into pretzels, whether it's swiping right for the perfect pet or sticking with our lovably random shelter buddies, the bigger picture is about balance. It's crucial to remember as we advance scientifically, we've also got a duty to respect the essence of life, the beautiful randomness and diversity it presents. Now, shifting gears before we become too philosophical for our own good, have you ever noticed how every hobby has its own weird lingo? I mean, the other day I heard a barista say latte art, and all I could imagine was my morning coffee wearing a beret and reciting poetry. Thoughts, Joe?
Indeed, Simon, as we puzzle over the ethics of engineered pets, our grappling with these complex choices is a bit like cracking a code. Speaking of codes, it transitions us smoothly into the fascinating world of cryptography. Here's a quick overview. Cryptography is essentially secret writing. It's been around for ages to keep messages away from prying eyes. Historic cipher machines like the Enigma have had massive impacts on world history. They encrypted communication during wartime. The complexity of the Enigma machine's mechanics was mind-boggling for its time. And let me tell you, without genius minds like Alan Turing and his team decoding those secrets, history could have taken a very different turn. It's incredible to think about how breaking codes, akin to unraveling the enigmas of today's ethical dilemmas, can shift the entire course of humanity. Let's decrypt the secrets of historic cipher machines together, shall we? Stay tuned.
Breaking codes and ethical dilemmas, huh? Imagine if cracking complex moral issues were like the Enigma. You'd need a top-secret team of philosophers in some underground bunker working around the clock. Guys, we've finally done it. We've solved the meaning of life. But sorry, can't tell you. It's classified.
Well, Simon, that would be an epic reveal, solving life's mysteries like it's a classified mission. But digging back into the Enigma machine, it was all rotors and wires, really intricate stuff. Operators would set it daily with different configurations, making their messages virtually undecryptable, until Turing and team got to work. These code breakers at Bletchley Park were heroes behind typewriters, wrestling with this mechanical beast and its never-ending combinations. Their efforts weren't just about intellectual curiosity. They were saving lives by unraveling enemy strategies. It shows how powerful cracking the right code can be, whether it's for winning wars or understanding our existence. And that's the kind of cipher, I'd say, is worth dedicating a top-secret philosopher team to crack. Listeners, get ready to dive deeper into the mind-bending world of cryptography. From the Rosetta Stone all the way to quantum computing, decoding has been a part of human history since the beginning of secrets. Keep your ears perked. This is going to get interesting.
Saving lives with typewriters makes you wonder if they ever felt like office workers with the fate of the world in their keystrokes. Bob, did you file those top-secret war-winning papers yet? And the coffee machine's out again.
Heh, you can just picture it. Hey Bob, we're cracking codes that could determine the outcome of a global conflict. No pressure. Oh, and memo to all staff, please stop using victory as the machine's password. Also, someone please fix the coffee machine. How are we supposed to save the world without caffeine?
Oh, coffee, the unsung hero of history. And speaking of heroes, Turing and his team really were the Avengers of their day, without the capes, probably. Enigma machine, complex coding device used by the Germans in World War II. Think of it like an evil Sudoku puzzle on steroids. The thing had these rotating scramblers creating over 150 quintillion possible settings. Each day a new setting. Talk about a daily brain teaser. Then you've got Alan Turing. This guy didn't just crack codes. He basically sets the groundwork for modern computing while he's at it. They built a machine called Bombay, which helped figure out Enigma's settings daily. Truly, they turned the tides of war, one decoded message at a time.
Absolutely, Simon. The Avengers of their time is right, minus the spandex and superpowers, unless you count extraordinary brain power as a super ability. Turing and his team weren't just working 9 to 5, they were in a relentless race against the clock where every second counted. Let's not sugarcoat it. A Sudoku on steroids doesn't give it enough credit. This machine wasn't just a bunch of numbers in a grid. It was an orchestra of electrical paths, with each day bringing a new symphony of complexities. And the bomb? It wasn't just another cog in the wheel. This was the equivalent of dropping a smartphone into the hands of someone used to smoke signals. And yet, despite Turing's groundbreaking work and the pivotal role he played in ending a world war, recognition was tragically delayed due to the prejudice of his time. Can you imagine what other history-altering geniuses we've overlooked? Now there's a thought-provoking tangent for the audience. How many unsung heroes have shaped our world from behind the shadows? All right, folks, who else has been left out of the textbooks? While you're pondering that, let's queue up for more historical deep dives. Next, the mysteries hidden within the Library of Alexandria. Stay tuned.
Overlooked geniuses, hidden victories, unsung heroes shaped history in the shadows.
You hit the nail on the head, Simon. These unsung heroes and geniuses truly worked in the shadows. Their intellect changed the trajectory of entire nations. The Enigma story reminds us how history often hangs on the balance of brains over brawn. Turing's work with algorithms to decipher Enigma laid down early concepts for artificial intelligence. Just think about that. It's sobering. While these code breakers grappled with the Enigma, they also shaped the very fabric of our digital world today, and most did so without fanfare or recognition during their lifetimes. This is a testament to the idea that true heroism isn't always about public accolades, but rather the quiet diligence that propels humanity forward, no matter who gets the credit. And now you've got me thinking. Listeners, what other pivotal moments do you reckon were shaped by invisible intellects? Drop us your thoughts. Stretch those brain cells. While you churn out theories, let's dive more into these cryptographic enigmas and their impact on today's technology. Don't touch that dial.
So Joe, with Turing laying down the groundwork for AI and our entire digital universe, where do you think we'd be right now if the Enigma code remained unsolved? Would our tech be less advanced, or have other brilliant minds stepped up to the challenge?
It's intriguing to think about, Simon. If the Enigma code had remained unsolved, we might be staring at an entirely different tech landscape. Without Turing's leaps in computation to break Enigma, progress in computer science could have stalled or taken a different path. We might not have seen such an accelerated rise of the digital age. But history has a way of bending around these intellectual roadblocks. Other brilliant minds may well have stepped up eventually. Necessity is the mother of invention, after all. Yet it's Turing's pivotal breakthroughs that painted the grand picture on our modern ciphers on canvas. No doubt, his legacy lives in every tap and swipe we make today. With that brushstroke of thought, let's put down our historical palette for now. What a journey through the artistry of intellect and ingenuity. Keep those dials locked. Infinite Podcast will be right back with even more mind-bending discussions. Stay tuned.
All right, wrapping up our intellectual saga on cryptography and the Enigma. Remember how it merged math with warfare? Similarly, there's richness hidden beneath the strokes of classical art. Many old masters actually snuck secret messages into their paintings. Talk about low-tech steganography. Artists like Da Vinci were OG cryptographers in their own right, using canvases instead of cipher machines. These guys dabbled in artsy espionage to express opinions that would have gotten them in a heap of trouble or just to flex their intellectual prowess. So next time you're gazing at some masterpiece, who knows what secrets might be layered in those picturesque vistas? Stick around as we decode more than just moral dilemmas. The Infinite Podcast will be back after this break.
You know, Simon, that takes me back to my college days. I remember taking this art history class, mostly for an easy A, if I'm being honest. But then we hit the Renaissance period, and I discovered these hidden messages in paintings. There's this one day, our professor pulls out a magnifying glass, holds it up to a seemingly ordinary painting, and boom, suddenly there's a face in the clouds that nobody had noticed before. Class went nuts. It was like finding a hidden track on your favorite album. That moment always stuck with me. It wasn't about just looking, but seeing beyond, searching for meaning where others might just glance and move on. And here we are on Infinite Podcast, still doing that conceptual deep diving. Makes you wonder, what else could be hiding in plain sight? Keep your eyes peeled and thoughts broad. More secret musings coming your way, listeners. Stay curious.
Oh, that art class got me scrutinizing every cloud and shadow for hidden faces. Ciphers on canvas are like Easter eggs in video games. Renaissance artists were the original Easter Bunny, hopping around leaving messages and political jabs wrapped up in their paint. Take Michelangelo. Rumor has it he painted some anatomical structures of the brain onto the Sistine Chapel ceiling, disguised as God's neckwear, a celestial Where's Waldo. The motivations? A sly nod to science in a place devoted to the divine, maybe? And don't forget, with today's tech, these old-school ciphers have evolved into digital steganography. Now we're hiding data inside images so well, you need more than a magnifying glass. You need a computer forensic team. So while classical artists used physical brushes to embed secrets, modern folk use pixels. Imagine what future historians will find in our digital masterpieces. Next up, how ancient symbols managed to sneak into your emojis. Stick around.
No doubt, Simon. Those Renaissance guys were the original masters of hidden content. But let's put a pin in that idea. Was it all about leaving messages, or were some of these artists just messing with us? Pulling off a 16th century prank? Picture this. Michelangelo up there on his scaffold, brushing in another layer of fresco, maybe chuckling under his breath as he tucks away another cerebral Easter egg. I bet nobody thought to look for other guest appearances in those holy scenes. Maybe there's a kidney stone in a corner or a spleen subtly shading the day from night. It really fires up the imagination and makes you appreciate the subversive humor these creatives might have had. You know what I think, Simon? Beyond secret messages or political jabs, art was their playground, and they peppered it with personal jokes meant for eternity, or until someone got smug enough to think they'd figured it out. And true, today's digital steganography means we could now be staring at an unassuming meme that's secretly carrying the nuclear codes. Kinda puts a fresh spin on browsing your feed, doesn't it? Listeners, brushstrokes or bitmaps, don't trust every image to tell you its whole story, because like classic canvases, modern visuals have layers upon layers of meaning and, well, secrets. So go ahead, play detective with pixels and pigments, eternal glory awaits. What do you say? Still up for the treasure hunt?
Oh, you're sparking some memories, Joe. This one time, back in my youthful days of punk rock and questionable haircuts, I had this t-shirt with a band logo on it, just standard fan attire, nothing fancy. But there was a tiny detail, real small print around the edge that almost no one noticed, a hidden message. So I'm wearing this to a gig, minding my own business, when another fan zeroes in. It's like he had x-ray vision. He walks up to me, points right at it, and says, "Dude, that's sick. You actually read the sleeve?" Turns out the band had put their entire manifesto, super tiny, circling their emblem, a secret declaration of principles only true fans recognized. Felt like I was in some elite club. We ended up discussing music philosophy for hours, just from that tiny interaction. Just goes to show how these little secrets can connect us through shared understanding. It's not always profound or historic like our ciphers on canvas, but sometimes it's about feeling part of something bigger, something hidden in plain sight.
Absolutely. Secret messages create unique bonds. It's like insider knowledge.
Insider knowledge, yeah, it's gold. It weaves this secret society fabric that's just so tantalizing. You're led into a vault of hidden gems once you see the unseen. With ciphers on canvas, it's like all those art aficionados are part of an exclusive club. They look at a painting and they see more than colors and shapes. They're in on the secret, decoding heritage with every curious squint. It turns every museum visit into a treasure hunt. Forget I Spy books. We've had I Spy hanging on gallery walls for centuries. Makes you want to don a deerstalker hat and turn any casual glance into a sleuth session. So folks, next time you see a painting, take a moment. Maybe there's a loot out there waiting to spill 16th century gossip.
Well, Simon, we've cracked ciphers on canvas and laughed over the hidden in-jokes that stitched a subculture together. With codes ranging from lofty Sistine ceilings to the rims of punk rock tees, it turns out comedy can be as encoded as any secret message. These little winks from history's artists and modern-day bands alike, they're reminders not to take things at face value, to look for the wink and the nudge amidst the formality. It's a universal kind of humor, spanning eras and genres infused into our human experience. So keep your eyes peeled and your wit sharp. Whether you're hunting Easter eggs in video games or Renaissance art, there's always a punchline waiting to be discovered. And now, before anyone encodes a plea for us to stop, let's crack on with more infinite podcast banter after the break.
You nailed it, Joe. Comedy in the codes, the secret winks, history's cryptic punchlines, they stretch far beyond those old canvas corners. The laughs don't stop at hidden messages. They're wrapped up in our very human mishaps with cryptography, too. Ever noticed how in pop culture, encryption gets the Hollywood treatment? Oversized, one-click hacker buttons breaking into world secrets while munching on a bag of chips. If only real life were that slick. Reality check. More often, it's a typo in the password causing a security breach. Not so much Mission Impossible, more like Mission I Forgot My Password Again. But let's dive headfirst into some comedy gold, when codes go comedically wrong. Encryption fails that are less about cloak and dagger drama and more slip on the banana peel slapstick. Here we go, listeners. Hang on for tales of when being cryptic is more facepalm than spy game intrigue. Stay tuned. Infinite giggles guaranteed.
You know, Simon, your password woes remind me of a story. Back in uni, there was this guy, let's call him Derek, who fancied himself the next big thing in programming. He decides to build his own unbreakable cipher program for an assignment. So Derek spends weeks bragging about this algorithm that would put government systems to shame. He finally unveils it to the class, and we're all eager to see Fort Knox turn digital. The moment of truth, he inputs his master password at the demo, and nothing happens. Turns out, He'd hard-coded the password wrong, with caps lock on. His unbreakable cipher got busted by his faulty keyboard. In essence, his encryption was so tight even he couldn't crack it, the virtual equivalent of locking your keys in the car. We're talking high-level security, provided you never need to actually use it. Classic Derek, classic cryptography fail. For all our techie advances, sometimes we're just one typo away from turning cutting edge into comedy gold. And let's face it, aren't those the best kind of fails? Tech blunders that leave us feeling just a bit more human? Listeners, any coding calamities of your own? Share those beauties. We can all use the laugh. Now strapping in as we pivot back to discussing why sometimes keeping secrets isn't quite as serious as it seems.
Joe, while Derek's story is a blend of hubris and classic misstep, let's flip it. To the coding purists out there, these fails aren't just goofs or gags, they're teachable moments wrapped in a humbling chuckle. Consider this perspective. Every failed attempt at encryption, no matter how trivial it seems, it actually propels us forward, right? It's not simply Derek locking his digital keys in the car. It's highlighting a real need for robust error handling in coding, learning to expect the unexpected usability issues. Kids today might laugh seeing old hackers in movies mistype a password and suddenly access missile codes, but that exaggeration has some footing in truth. Simple screw-ups have led to colossal cracks in security. We jest about it, yet it underscores the reality that figuring out what went wrong is as critical as getting it right. So there you are, listeners, a side serving of serious thought with your spoonful of funny flubs. Sometimes comedy is just cryptography's way of teaching us humility and savvy design. Now, before we encrypt ourselves into corners, Infinite Podcast rolls onward.
Absolutely, Simon. While we laugh at the slip-ups and facepalms in our cryptic misadventures, it's clear that there's a philosophy of privacy stirring beneath this comedy of errors. Each encrypted mishap is a reminder of why we value, and sometimes struggle with, protecting information. Our bloopers show the human side of digital secrecy, punctuating our narrative with laughter while schooling us on the delicacy of data. They reinforce the tenet that even though safeguarding our virtual vaults is serious business, the learning curve doesn't have to be humorless. So let us encrypt our failures into lessons and hashes of humor. Let them guide us to better guardrails for our gigabytes and gigglebytes alike. Remember, folks, while privacy is paramount, the passphrase to progress often includes embracing our imperfections. Listeners, as our encryption tale decrypts to a close, keep your pins close but your funny stories closer. Infinite Podcast will continue after this. No secret handshake required.
Joe, you've nailed it. We're toggling between serious and silly in the encryption realm, but at its heart, it's all about that endless tug of war, privacy. Let's wrap this up with a nod to our own flubs, because listeners, every time Derek mashes the wrong key or Hollywood serves us a belly laugher of a hacking scene, we're reminded why these discussions matter for everyone, not just tech nerds or art buffs. It's all circling back to one pivotal point, the philosophy of privacy. Is ironclad encryption an unassailable right? Should there be master keys for just-in-case scenarios on a government's ring? These aren't just questions for the tech-savvy. They touch each pixel and brushstroke of our lives. Imagine a world where everybody encrypts everything. You'd have ultimate privacy, sure, but also a mighty can of worms if your safety is tangled up somewhere in that encrypted web. This stuff matters more than ever. So, let's ease into a conversation where jokes might be fewer, but reflection runs deep. Privacy versus national security, human rights against state control. Where does cryptography fit into this modern mosaic? Keep those ears open. Infinite Podcast is diving into the depths of digits and dilemmas.
Tough balance, absolute privacy or controlled access. Let's dive in.
Joe, this reminds me of a trip I took out to the wilds. No phones, no TV, just nature. Now you'd think being that off the grid was pure bliss, like diving into a pool of privacy. But guess what? Not even 2 days in, and our group is antsy because Well, we're off the radar, completely disconnected. Picture it, an absolute break from society, yet everyone's nervous. It dawned on us that total seclusion meant vulnerability. There was safety in our connected world, albeit with its prying eyes. We had the cleanest slate for privacy, but traded whispers about who might hike by or the thought of needing help with only echoes replying, the epitome of isolated security, but not without its risks. It got us all rethinking how invisible we truly wanted to be in our everyday lives. Coming back to civilization was a relief. Passwords and PIN codes suddenly felt more like lifelines than shackles. An unbreakable encryption of sorts, connecting us to each other and guards against total isolation. This balance, isn't it what we're all searching for?
That's quite the paradox, Simon. Craving privacy, yet feeling exposed in total seclusion. So where do we draw the line between valuing our digital privacy and acknowledging that interconnectedness provides a safety net?
Hey, listeners just tuning in, you're riding the waves of Infinite Podcast with Joe and yours truly, Simon. Today's sticky web we're all caught up in? The knotty philosophy of privacy. Picture this tug of war. On one end, wanting your secret garden of data unbeatable by any snoops or sneaks. That's right, total privacy buzz. Encrypt everything, digital diaries locked tighter than a drum. But whoops, here comes the paradox. On the other end of that rope, realizing being super invisible maybe isn't all it's cracked up to be when you actually want to find someone, or worse, need them to find you. So how do we juggle this hot potato? Veering between our hush-hush haven and a cozy blanket of connectivity without burning our fingertips or getting frostbite. Stick around as we crack the code on the gnarly ethics of unbreakable encryption and what it means for us warm-blooded creatures thriving on both secret handshakes and group hugs in this digital age.
Finding the middle ground is like threading an invisible needle.
Exactly, Joe. So the real question is, how do we thread that needle without pricking our fingers on either side? Too much exposure or excessive secrecy?
Absolutely. Threading that needle requires understanding the stakes. Fact is, total privacy means strong encryption, where your data and communication are yours alone. That sounds ideal in an age of identity theft and data mining. On one hand, there's Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It defends against arbitrary interference with privacy. Think about how crucial this is for activists, journalists, or anyone living under oppressive regimes. Unbreakable encryption can literally mean the difference between life and death. But swing to the other side. Law enforcement argues that encryption can shield illegal activities, making investigations into serious crimes like terrorism tougher. It's the going dark problem. FBI versus Apple back in 2016 spotlighted this when they asked for a backdoor to an iPhone belonging to a terror suspect. There's no easy answer. Balance is key. Figuring out standards, allowing individuals to retain privacy without hampering legitimate safety considerations. This is the fabric of our digital future we're weaving, as personal as it is political.
Wouldn't neural networks make just the wackiest artists, Joe? It's like giving 1,000 monkeys 1,000 paintbrushes, except these digital Picassos actually knock out masterpieces. Sure, they're crunching numbers, but those outputs can be weirdly moving, unnervingly beautiful pieces that make you think there's a real human soul behind them. Yet while AI art is cool, it ain't stealing that creative fire from us mere mortals, just adding a new flavor to the mix, kind of like pineapple on pizza. Some dig it, others don't. Either way, good luck asking an AI to draw you the sound of one hand clapping, unless that's already somewhere in its dataset. AI is stirring up the pot for sure, mixing creativity into our tech stew, a blend we'll all be sipping and figuring out for years to come. And listeners, whatever your take, stick with Infinite Podcast because trust me, there's always more to dish out.
Great points about the complexity of privacy, Simon. And while we're on the topic of things not being so black and white, let's segue into artificial intelligence creating art. So back in the day, if someone said an artist wasn't human, you'd think they were off their rocker. But now, neural networks are cranking out canvas-worthy content that's sometimes indistinguishable from a human's touch. AI doesn't just compute, it creates. These neural networks mimic brain functions to pull off this wizardry, learning styles, and brushing up against what we consider creativity. The kicker? People are actually buying AI-generated masterpieces. Take Robbie Barat's AI-generated nudes, or the $432 sold piece at Christie's by Obvious Art, a collective exploring the interface between art and algorithms. Times are shifting. Does AI-crafted art enhance our creative scope or threaten the livelihood of flesh and blood artists? Infinite Podcast isn't shying away from these existential curveballs. Stay tuned as we brushstroke our way through AI and digital art.
Hold up, Joe. AI's scribbling and doodling its way into galleries, sure, but let's not hand over the artist title just yet. These neural networks? They're kinda like high-tech copycats, fantastic at mimicking styles, churning out piece after piece without breaking a sweat, or having a heart-to-heart with their muse. But here's the twist. Can we call it creativity if there's no soul-searching behind those pixels? Is AI art expanding our horizons, or is it cheapening the creative process, reducing vision to algorithms and brushstrokes to data points? The real brain tickler is when you slap that AI-generated label on something. Suddenly, everyone wants a peek. Probably the same crowd that rubbernecks car wrecks. Sure, Robbie Barat and Obvious Art are banking off of this buzz, but what does it mean for the average pen and paper Joe? Is artificial intelligence redefining artistic talent, turning it from a human experience to code-curated content, or merely a novelty soon to hang beside pet rocks and disco balls in the attic of forgotten fads? Listeners, before you swap your berets for beanies and trade canvases for code, stick around as Infinite Podcast tackles this digital dilemma head-on.
The nail on the head, Simon. These AI-generated art pieces force us to question creativity's essence. Is it about the ability to feel, the emotional depth behind a stroke, or simply about creating something that aesthetically pleases or provokes thought? The fact is, neural networks are shaking up the traditional art scene. By digesting vast amounts of visual data and artistic techniques, these algorithms spit out artwork after learning what's been fed into them. It's mathematical mimicry, but with a flair that can be startlingly beautiful or unsettling. Yet, where's the intention, the passion, the years of honing one's craft? AI skips all that. No backstories of struggling artists, just programmers tweaking code until they strike aesthetic gold. Some argue this democratizes art. Anyone with access to an algorithm can churn out masterpiece after masterpiece. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. While Robbie Barat and Obvious Art showed us AI could crack open wallet and hearts alike, this doesn't replace human creativity. It merely adds another brush in our collective toolbox. We still flock to the stories, the people, the hands behind the art. AI art isn't a replacement. It's a companion piece in our ever-expanding gallery. And like every great work, it leaves us pondering, what defines art and who gets to make it? Stick around as we plug into more currents of creativity here at Infinite Podcast. Artificial intelligence might be drafting the future, but human spirit is still curator-in-chief.
Wrap on today's tour of the art world, reimagined through the lens of zeros and ones. Thanks for tuning in to Infinite Podcast, where even our sign-offs spark curiosity. Remember, lovely listeners, to keep your ears perked up for more deep dives with me, Simon, and my co-host Joe, who always finds a way to leave you pondering life, tech, and everything in between. Don't forget, 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Set those reminders and join us back here for another round of banter, insights, and maybe a few laughs. Because let's be honest, where else are you going to get such a fine blend of wit and wisdom? Catch you on the flip side. Stay curious, stay awesome, and as ever, keep podcasting infinitely.